you so much, Diksha, for this wonderful opportunity to speak to the larger Khaki family and fraternity. In fact, let me acknowledge that Khaki and its founder Bharat Gotoskar have played a major role in the writing of this book. In fact, I was working with Loksatta.com and Bharat as part of a video series on the history of Mumbai called Goshta Mumbaichi. And as an aside, I mean, those of you who can understand Marathi may like to watch these episodes on YouTube to know more about the ancient, medieval, and colonial history of our city. It was after the shoot of one such episode at on the Honeymoon Circle Gardens that I met retired police official Rohidas Dusar when this case cropped up during a conversation. Mr. Dusar, I mean, the moment you say policeman, there are certain stereotypes that come to, there's certain stereotypes that are associated with it. But Mr. Dusar does not fit the stereotype because he was a high school teacher, and even today he retains the studious airs of teacher. He has written a number of books on crime and the Mumbai and Maharashtra police. And one of his books is on the Bawla murder case. So this case cropped up during the course of a conversation, and I recalled having read a column, recalled having read an article on this by Mulu Pillai in his weekly column in the Mint, and I set to work on the topic. And as I got down to writing the book, Bharat, who's a walking encyclopedia on the history of Mumbai, helped me with valuable references. In fact, it was Bharat's tip off which helped me locate Bawla's residence opposite Chopati. Gradually, as I dug deeper, I realized that the Bawla murder case was not a usual run-of-the-mill murder mystery. True, this was a murder that had shocked the nation and contemporary society. It had led to a media trial, just like the SSR case that happened recently. We saw a massive interplay of forces, often at cross purposes with each other. But there was something else that interested me as a student of history and social movements. I was intrigued by the rich tapestry of micro histories that played out both before and after the murder, like the Brahmin versus non-Brahmin conflict, Hindu nationalism, the Hindu Sangathan movement, the Shuddhi movement that sought convergence and reconvergence to Hinduism. In a certain sense, the murder was part of this larger narrative. See, the murder, I would say, in a sense, set off something that is referred to as a butterfly effect. It set off a cataclysmic chain of events that culminated in the abdication of one of the foremost Indian princes. So our story begins on the 12th of January 1925 when this man Abdul Kader Bawla, yeah, so this man Abdul Kader Bawla was known as one of the richest men in what was then colonial Bombay. I'm sure that many of you have heard of the philanthropist Haji Sabu Siddiq. So he was Sabu Siddiq's grandson. He was born into the mercantile Puja community, and he was just 25 years old at the time of his murder. Abdul Kader Bawla was a Congress corporator. He was a congressman. He was a corporator from the Bee Ward in Mandvi. And as I said, he was one of the richest men in colonial Bombay. In those days, he had a fortune of 4 million, which was a very princely sum in those days. So on the 12th of January 1925, he decided to go on a drive with his mistress Mumtaz Begum, a beautiful courtesan and Bawla's mistress. So they drove to Gateway of India, which had been, so I think the construction had been completed just 1 year prior, so 1924. From there, they went to Mahalakshmi and came back to Chopati because Bawla used to stay opposite Chopati. So there, opposite Wilson College, I mean, this is Bawla's residence at Islam Club, which is right opposite Chopati. So when you cross Wilson College and go towards Malabar Hill, there's a turning on your right which takes you to Babulnath. This is the second-hand building before that. So near the Wilson College, they came upon Bawla's secretary, Kavu Nepa Matthew, a former journalist himself. Bawla asked him to hop into the car, and then they went up Malabar Hill via Teembatti, Walkeshwar, etc. So just as they crossed what is today's Hanging Garden and came onto Ridge Road, suddenly there was a car that approached them from the rear, It banged into Bawla's car. It was a red Maxwell car, the one that banged into the car, and cut them from the front. Some 7 or 8 men got down. They abused Bawla and they shot at him. They also shot at Matthew. In fact, Matthew's wound was so horrible that they actually had to cut off his arm. Actually, had to cut off his right arm. It was so bad. So they shot at Bawla, and Bawla was injured, and they tried to pull. They were pulling Mumtaz Begum from the car. While doing so, they tried to disfigure her face. In fact, one of the wounds was so deep that Mumtaz Begum's nose was almost severed from her face. But it so happened that we Indians believe in something called coincidence. In Marathi, we call it yoga yoga. So you had a similar set of coincidence that culminated in what happened later. So there were 4 British army officers who were in Mumbai at that point of time. They had gone to the Willingdon Club opposite the racecourse for a game of golf. So they were returning to the Hotel Taj at Apollo Bandar, and this man, Lieutenant General John McLean Sagert, was driving the car, and with him was Colonel C.E. Vickery and Lieutenants Francis Batley and Maxwell Stephen. So instead of taking the Hughes Road to go to the intended destination, they accidentally took the right turn and went up Ridge Road. And they saw this incident unfold right in front of them. They saw some flashes, which being army men, they identified as flashes of a pistol. And they heard a woman scream, which was Mumtaz. And they stopped their car and rushed into the factories. And I have gone through the court documents myself, and this was a typical Bollywood style Maramari, because Segert, who led the heroic rescue of Mumtaz Begum, was shot at 4 times, of which 3 of these bullets actually hit him. He was slashed multiple times, stabbed, etc. But they put up a brave fight. Now, these men, they were in civil clothes, they were not in uniform. They had no weapons with them except one golf club, which they used in the melee, and it broke. But they put up a very stiff fight. The assailants were compelled to flee. Mumtaz was almost abducted, but she was saved by Segert and his colleague Batley. And more importantly, they managed to seize one of these assailants. Bawla was rushed to the JJ hospital, where he was declared dead later because his liver was torn, severe internal injuries. So, of his fortune worth 40 lakh, he billed 1 lakh to Mumtaz Begum in his dying declaration, because then Mumtaz Begum was also pregnant with Bawla's child. Immediately the day after the murder, there was a huge fracas. I mean, the BMC, the Bombay Municipal Corporation General Body, because Bawla was the youngest corporator at that point of time. Remember he was only 25. So the BMC passed a condolence motion, of course, condoling Bawla's death. Corporators said that in this case, in the case of this murder, there was more to it than actually met the eye. The press, of course, went for the jugular, because Bawla, again, remember, was a rich man, one of the leading public men of the city. This case was covered extensively by the Marathi newspaper Navakar, started by the nationalist Kakasaheb Khadilkar from Mumbai, and also by Bombay Chronicle, Pioneer, Times of India, etc. So, just one day after the murder, Sir Patrick Kelly, who was the police commissioner of Bombay, in fact, he was one of the longest serving police commissioners of the city. He wrote to the secretary of the Home Department, Government of Bombay, pointing to this conspiracy being hatched or instigated in one of India's most prominent princely states, that is Indore. So Kelly wrote to the Home Secretary saying that this lady Mumtaz, was Bawla's mistress, was in the keeping of the Maharaja of Indore for a few years. She had left Tukojirao Holkar, the Maharaja of Indore, in April 1924 and had come to Bombay, where she was kept by Bawla. She was under intense pressure to return to Indore. In fact, just a few months ago, Mumtaz's sister had written to her from Amritsar, saying that the Indore authorities were collecting Pahlwans, that is, wrestlers, with the intention of abducting her and forcibly taking her to Indore. Bawla himself was said to have received threatening letters that he should return the girl to Indore, failing which there would be some very dire consequences. So Kelly wrote to the Home Secretary saying that everything, therefore, points at present to a conspiracy hatched in Indore or by instigation from Indore to abduct Mumtaz. And it so happened that eventually this case would lead to the abdication of Tukojirao Holkar. The Holkars, as you know, were among the foremost Maratha chiefs. The house of the Holkars was founded by Malabar Holkar, who was an outstanding general who started his career during the tenure of Peshwa Bajirao the First, and later he served multiple Peshwas, I mean, including Bajirao's grandson Madhavrao the First. Tukojirao Holkar, of course, I mean, they were adopted into the family of the Holkars. He was one of the leading Indian princes. He has succeeded his father Shivajirao Holkar to the throne after Shivajirao's abdication. In fact, one common thread that runs through the Holkar family is that both Shivajirao Holkar and Tukojirao Holkar had to abdicate the Gaddi, but in a different set of circumstances. And later, both Tukojirao and his son Yashwantrao would marry American women and face a great deal of opposition back in India, including from their colonial overlords. So Tukojirao Holkar was born in 1890. He received a very elite education, and he was married to Chandravati Bai, who was a senior Maharani, and to Indira Bai, the junior Maharani. In 1913, Tukojirao was at an art exhibition in Bombay when he chanced upon a charming portrait of a woman, Indira Bai Namujirao, whom he soon married. In fact, after his abdication, the Times of India would state that the weakness for the fair sex was the bane of his regime. So he replaced his father Shivajirao Holkar. Shivajirao Holkar was someone who was given to irascible fits of temper. So he replaced him on the throne. And even before the Bawla murder case, Tukojirao's rule was not free from controversy, because in 1922 there was a lady called Sundarbai Parshikar who wrote to the viceroy. I mean, Sundarbai was married to one of the hereditary divans of the Holkars, it's the Parshikars, and this man suffered from epileptic fits. So the marriage was dissolved under Tukojirao's orders on grounds that an epileptic man was not capable of contracting marriage. Soon after, this man was married again under the orders of His Highness Tukojirao Holkar and given a 20-year-old boy as an adoptive son. So Sundarbai Parshikar, his first wife, who was forced to leave, sent petitions to the viceroy. Now, these petitions are interesting for two reasons. She refers to the kidnapping of girls in Indore and alleges that no one can do the kind of things that His Highness has done in the whole of the British Empire. And she says, after all, it was the British army that kept him on his gati, and if that protection was withdrawn, the people of Indore would settle the question in a week. However, it was the murder of Abdul Kader Bawla that would eventually cause Tukojirao's ouster from the throne. It so happened that Mumtaz Begum belonged to a family of Punjabi Muslim courtesans, and she, in 1913 or so, she came to Indore with her mother, Wazir Begum, another Punjabi Muslim courtesan. The family claimed to have descended from courtesans who were employed in the Darbar of Maharaja Ranjit Singh of Punjab. She was then kept by Tukojirao Holkar. In 1919, the Holkars had come to Bombay, and of course Mumtaz Begum and her mother were also part of this tour. One evening, Tukojirao visited Mumtaz Begum's mother, and she offered to marry Mumtaz after getting her converted to Hinduism. So this offer was spurned by Wazir Begum, her mother. The next day, Tukojirao again came to their dwelling, and he said that I am eager to take Mumtaz with me for a movie. I will, and she will come back to you in a couple of hours. She was taken from her mother by this man called Shankarrao Gowde, who plays a very major role in this whole controversy. So she was taken from her mother. Mumtaz was taken from her mother by Shankarrao Gowde, and instead of taking her to the movies, she was actually sent back to Indore without her mother's consent. So Wazir Begum was naturally very angry at this. She launched a complaint to the police, but this whole complaint fell through because there was no documentary evidence of Mumtaz being a minor at that point of time. So then in 1900 and in 1900 and just a second, 21, Tukojirao went to England with his family, and Mumtaz was also supposed to accompany him. Now, there are accounts which suggest that Mumtaz was kept in Indore with a status equivalent to that of the two Maharanis. She was given expensive jewelry to wear. According to eyewitness accounts, she had the best of luxuries in the Zanana. She was also taught a bit of Marathi because in the court she says that she can read Balgod Marathi. I mean, that is the Devanagari style of writing Marathi. So in 1921, he decided Tukojirao decided to go to England with his family, and Mumtaz was supposed to accompany him. By then, Wazir Begum had parked herself in Bombay, and she had gotten herself married to a man called Muhammad Ali Muhammad Yusuf, a former soldier and a race punter. So when Wazir Begum came to know about these plans, she lodged a complaint with the Bombay Police. The police went on to the steamer, which was supposed to take Mumtaz and the entourage to England, but Mumtaz, though she wanted to go back to her mother, was unable to voice her intent because she had been threatened on the pain of death. So she said that she was going to England on her own free will, and she was allowed to proceed. So after she came back from England, she was pregnant with Tukojirao's child. Then she beseeched Tukojirao and the authorities at Indore to allow her mother to stay with her. So her relatives were allowed to come to Indore. They were allowed to stay with her. Then a child was born to Mumtaz. Now this is the turning point in this whole story. Mumtaz said that when the child was born, she heard her cry. Even the nurses congratulated her after the delivery. However, later the nurses said that the child was dead. So Mumtaz claimed that the child had been killed by the nurses at Indore. Then she made up her mind to leave the Maharaja, but she was prevented from doing so because of the surveillance around her. Later, her status at Indore saw a great fall. I mean, her Tukojirao's visits to Mumtaz became extremely infrequent. Some of her privileges and allowances were done away with. So Mumtaz was making up her mind to flee the protection of the Maharaja. In 1924, Tukojirao had gone to Bhanpura for shikar with, of course, Mumtaz, her mother and her stepfather were also part of the tour. So at Bhanpura, Mumtaz and Tukojirao had a major showdown. And Tukojirao informed Mumtaz that she was at liberty to go away from Indore if she liked, but he did not issue any written orders to that effect. So Mumtaz, later he asked her to go to Mussoorie from Bhanpura by train. So she left by train from Bhanpura for Mussoorie, and they were supposed to change trains at Delhi. At Delhi, she got down from the train and refused to proceed further. At which instance, the members of, I mean, the officials from the Indore Darbar who were with her objected, but the railway police intervened. The railway police at Delhi intervened, and Mumtaz was allowed to leave. So Mumtaz went to Indore. Mumtaz went to Amritsar. At Amritsar, there were certain elements from Indore who tried to sort of threaten her and coerce her to return to Indore. There was a Pehlwan in Amritsar called Habba Pehlwan, who was formerly employed by Indore. So he used to come to Mumtaz's house, threaten her, etc., etc. But Mumtaz refused. Eventually, she came to. She was also visited by one of Tukojirao's personal assistants called Sadhu Huzuria. So, when during her conversation with Sadhu, Mumtaz said that one of the reasons why she fled Indore was that this man, Shankarrao Gowde, who was Tukojirao's major domo, had made some indecent proposals to her. She said that was one of the reasons why she decided to flee Indore and come to Amritsar. Eventually, Mumtaz Begum came to Bombay. At Bombay, they were staying at the Rangari Chawl at Parel. Of course, there were several attempts even then to sort of abduct her and get her back to Indore. And the family was running out of money. So she began performing again. Here, Mumtaz met Abdul Kader Bawla, Dadu Sheikh, who was also referred to as Dadu Sheikh. He was a rich man, as I said, a born giver. I mean, someone who loved the good life. So he was kept by, she was kept by Bawla. Then, when Bawla came to know that there were some plans afoot to abduct Mumtaz Begum and take her to Indore, he shifted her to one of his houses at Sleeter Road at Grant Road in South Bombay. In August end 1924, Mumtaz left for Pune with Bawla. When she came back, she had an argument with her mother because her mother had seen some elements from Indore in or around the Sleeter Road residence. So she was naturally worried about the safety of her daughter. So she had a massive argument with her. It so happened that Mumtaz's stepfather, Muhammad Ali Muhammad Yusuf, he was eager to get Mumtaz married off to his son, Muhammad Khan Sharif. So he revived that proposal. Mumtaz was not in favor of marrying her stepbrother, so she objected. So again, there was a major showdown. So eventually, on the 22nd of September 1924, she left her parents and shifted to the Tardev Club. This seems to be a reference to the Wimbledon Club at Tardev with Bawla. They even at the Tardev Club, there was an attempt by the conspirators to abduct her by paying the watchman to leave the back gate open, after which they would drive in, probably disable Bawla and flee with Mumtaz. So then Bawla and his mother shifted Mumtaz to the residence at Chopati. In Amritsar, I mean, her mother went back to Amritsar, parents went back to Amritsar. On 29th of December, Mumtaz Begum's mother writes to the Deputy Commissioner of Police, Amritsar, about the possibility that her family was likely to come to harm because of some conspirators from Indore. But unfortunately, uh, the police refused to intervene. They said that there were no strong grounds for taking any cognizance of this complaint. So, and of course, on the 12th of January, Bawla was killed. Mumtaz was mostly injured. Her face was partially disfigured. So this case was covered extensively by Bombay Chronicle. In fact, it was the Bombay Chronicle which helped identify the assailant, the captured assailant, the man who was captured by the British Army officers. Uh, 3 days after the murder, the 15th of January, a visitor came to the office of the Bombay Chronicle and said he had some specific information about this man. So the management contacted Sir Patrick Kelly, the Commissioner of Police, Bombay. That man was called for an identification parade, and the captured attacker was identified as Shafi Ahmad Shafi Nabi, who was a Risaldar in the Indore State Police Force. He was a relative of the Inspector General of Police Ghulam Muhammad, who was a very powerful man during Tukojirao's regime. So, Sir Patrick Kelly set up a special team to investigate this case. Now, I would like to say a few words about Sir Patrick Kelly. Patrick Kelly was an Irishman. He was a very upright officer, one of the longest serving police commissioners of the city from 1922 to 1933. He was someone who quelled the terror of the Pathan gangs in Bombay, because the Pathans came from northwest frontier province, Afghanistan, etc., to Bombay. They started working as manual labor in the docks, and then they got into money lending, and they would lend money at very high rates of interest to the mill workers, the working class, etc. Even today in Marathi, there's a term called Pathani Vyas, which means very high rate of interest. In 1929, a few years after the Bawla murder case, you had something called the Pathan riots in Bombay. There were rumors, because see, the tension between the largely Maharashtrian working class, the textile mill workers, and the Pathans was brewing the because of the money lending activities of the Pathans. Suddenly there were some rumors of Pathans being involved in child lifting, and it's somewhat like the Palghar mob lynching incident that happened last year. So this pent-up fury, saw the mill workers taking to the streets. Some in her autobiography, Ushatai Dange, the wife of Communist Party of India veteran Shripad Amrut Dange, she says that in 2 days, around 80 to 90 Pathans were butchered on the streets of Bombay. The situation was so bad, and during these riots, a group of Pathans actually attacked the police commissioner office, which is, even in these days, this is unthinkable. They attacked the police commissioner's office, and one theory says that they possibly wanted to kill or hurt Patrick Kelly because he had come down heavily on the activities of the Pathans. But the attack was repulsed. I mean, one account says that these Pathans actually stabbed an armed guard who was standing beneath Patrick Kelly's office. Patrick Kelly heard the commotion. He came down. He saved the guard himself. He actually saved his life. And looking at the heroic rescue of their colleague by the police commissioner himself, the other constables joined in, and the Pathans were soundly beaten back. And because Patrick Kelly commanded the loyalty of his men because he spoke fluent Marathi with them, and he was someone who would lead from the front. So this in short is the history of Patrick Kelly. In fact, many of you may remember that last year the Bombay Police, the Mumbai Police revived its horse-mounted corps, mounted policemen. So in 1929 onwards, Sir Patrick Kelly had used this horse cavalry, these horse-mounted policemen, to crack down on the Pathan gangs. Of course, the horse cavalry was disbanded by Patrick Kelly himself later. Now, this case is a fine example, because in those days there were no advanced forensic intelligence tools. So this case was cracked solely on human intelligence and circumstantial and material intelligence. In fact, I've been told that even today, the Maharashtra Police Academy Act Nasik has included the Bawla murder case in the syllabus. It is part of the syllabus even today. It's an example of a very fine investigation. So eventually, the Bombay police arrested 8 more people apart from the one arrested assailant called Shafi Ahmad. This included Major General Anandrao Phanse, who was a distant relative of Maharaja Tukojirao Holkar, and also Shankarrao Gowde's nephew. He was arrested, and all the other people who were arrested as well, they were in some way or the other connected to the Indore Darbar. After Shankarrao Gowde's fall from grace, and Shankarrao Gowde was arrested on charge of defrauding the Indore state of funds. So soon after Mumtaz Begum left Indore. So Anandrao Phanse met he was Shankarrao Gowde was Phanse's maternal uncle. He met him in jail, and Gowde said that he could be released from jail only if Mumtaz Begum returned to Indore. So he roped in his co-conspirators, who again, as I said, were associated with the Indore Darbar in some capacity or the other. So they would tell Mumtaz and her family in Amritsar, Bombay, etc., etc. He came to Mumbai. He stayed at the Aurora House and Somerset House, for the properties of the Indore Darbar in South Mumbai. He bought that red Maxwell car with one of his co-conspirators because it was very risky to use a car of the Indore Darbar. These conspirators also paid Bawla's driver for tips about his master's movement. So after the arrest, there was an intense media trial. There was huge public interest in the case. There were massive crowds at the coroner's court, and even in the court when the accused were produced there. In fact, many people also wrote letters and even poems addressed to Mumtaz when she was in the police protection. In March 1926, the trial opened in the court of the Chief Presidency Magistrate. Again, there were huge crowds there, especially when Mumtaz was present. So Mumtaz obliquely hinted that these 9 arrested accused were not the real brains behind the crime. So she said she had no personal enmity with any of the accused, but she said they had not acted on their own. She said that none of those who were really involved with the case were being actually tried in court. In April, the court ruled that Phanse was the kingpin of this case and said that the case would be tried by the High Court. In the Bombay High Court, the murder trial commenced on the 27th of April before Justice L.C. Crump. This man, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who later partitioned India, was the defense counsel for Major General Anandarao Pansing, and his wife, Rattanbai Rati. She sat through the proceedings. The accused were charged on 13 counts, including murder, attempt to murder, abduction, etc., etc. And K.L. Gauba, who has written on this case, says that Mumtaz stood her ground remarkably well, despite facing some of the most brilliant cross-examiners of the day. Eventually, of the nine accused, seven were convicted. Now, these three were sentenced to death. But what is more interesting are the remarks of the judge. So, Justice Crump, in his judgment, makes a very oblique and strong reference to Indore. He says that the facts of the case did not suggest that Mumtaz wanted to return to Indore, because this was what was being said by the defense. So he said, more importantly, this is more important, that there were persons behind them, that is the attackers, whom we cannot precisely indicate. And Justice Crump said, and when we cannot precisely indicate, it is useless to have conjecture, but it is indicated by Mumtaz's long connection to Indore that this attack and conspiracy emanated from Indore. And the reference to the king of Indore is very obvious, though it was not said in so many words. After the judgment, there were demands by the press to punish the real accused. Because three people were sentenced to death. Major General Anandarao Pansing was accused as, who was named as the prime accused. Jinnah managed to get his sentence. He was only sentenced to life imprisonment and transportation for life. So there was a demand by the press to punish the real accused, the real instigators. And even the open debauchery of Indian princes was slammed in the columns of these newspapers. The reference to Tukojirao, of course, was very obvious. The Bawla murder case was raised even in the British Parliament, in the House of Commons. And scholars like Umma De Chala have referred to how this case was a site of contest between the internal sovereignty of the Indian princely rulers and the judicial authority of the colonial state, between Indian norms and Victorian concepts. Meanwhile, Mumtaz was pregnant. Bawla's daughter Sadat Begum was born to her, and then Mumtaz entered into a legal battle with her parents, her mother and her stepfather. At Amritsar, she married a man called Abdul Rahman, who was the son of a very rich trader of hides. She became his third wife. Later, they divorced, and Mumtaz reinvented herself as a stage singer. She sang Marathi and Urdu songs. She also performed in Bombay. And in 1926, there was a silent movie that was inspired by Mumtaz and the Bawla murder case called Pulin Kanta. Later, she left for Hollywood, and there are no authentic sources as to what happened to her after she went there. So, as I said, there were three accused who were sentenced to death. Pansing, of course, was sentenced to life. These three people, which includes Captain, of course, Shafi Ahmad Nabi Ahmad, the man who was captured by the British Army officers. Then Captain Shamrao Dighe, who was a captain in the Indore State Air Force. Indore State had a very small Air Force. And this man, Pushpashil Balawan Ponde, was related to, distantly related, his mother was distantly related to Tukojirao Holkar. So these three men were sentenced to death. They filed mercy petitions, but they were rejected. Their case went right up to Privy Council, and there were questions by the media over who funded the defense, because it was obviously a very expensive case to fight. And I have gone through the original files in the National Archives. It's a huge, thick file. So eventually, Pushpashil Ponde was just a 22, 23-year-old boy. So he was sentenced to death, but his sentence was commuted to life because he went insane in jail. So, and since an insane man cannot be hung, only Captain Dighe and Shafi Ahmad were hung on the 19th of November 1925. And even then, the interest of the people in the case had not abated, because you find media reports saying that there was a crop of rumors in the city that on so and so date the two accused would be hung, and there would be a huge crowd of people outside the Umar Khadi jail or the Dogri jail where the remand home stands today. So they were hung in secret on the 19th of November 1925, and newspapers say that even when he was being executed, this man, Captain Shamrao Dige, in the very end, he continued to maintain his innocence. He maintained that he was not there at the site of the murder, and he was falsely implicated in the case. Despite the hanging of the two accused, the press was seeking Tukojirao's ouster. Media reports said he was a principal wire puller in the case. The case, and rightly so, went dangerously close to implicating him. The Indore Darbar, on its part, said that Mumtaz and her parents wanted to flee Indore with jewels. But the problem when it came to Tukojirao was he could not be tried in a court of law like any other normal citizen of British India. Because the Montfort report said that if a ruler had to be deposed or deprived of his rights, this had to be done via a commission of inquiry. And there were some rules like the names of the members being communicated to the ruler beforehand, and the report to be made public even if only if he so desired. But it was very obvious from the trials of Bahadur Shah Zafar and later Mallar Rao Gaikwad of Baroda that these were largely show trials. So in January, before that, this demand for Tukojirao's abdication became a site of contest between the Brahmanical and non-Brahmanical factions in society. There were social reformers, Vittal Ramji Shinde and Prabodhankar Keshav. Vittal Ramji Shinde is again one of the neglected social reformers in Maharashtra. And Prabodhankar Keshav Sitaram Thakre, we know him more as the father of the late Shiv Sena Chief Balasaheb Thakre, but he was a social reformer, anti-caste activist, journalist, artist. In fact, the public celebrations of Navratri in Mumbai were started by Prabodhankar Thakre in 1926. So Prabodhankar Thakre and Vittal Ramji Shinde stood up for Tukojirao Holkar. Vittal Ramji Shinde addressed a few public meetings in Tukojirao's support. Prabodhankar Thakre actually wrote 3 books on the whole Bawla Mumtaz case. 2 of them were in Marathi. Mahamayache Thaiman, that is the name of one book. The name of the second book is Bawla Mumtaz Prakran. And he wrote a third book in English called The Temptress. In fact, this whole Bawla Mumtaz case, the Bawla murder case, finds a mention around 2.5 pages in his autobiography, Maji Jivan Gatha. So, Prabodhankar in his autobiography claims that one reason why Tukojirao was targeted so ruthlessly and incessantly by the media and the intelligentsia was that he was a non-Brahmin. And he said that the press at that point of time was dominated by Brahmins. So they usually had a very condescending view of princely states which were ruled by non-Brahmins. And the Holkars, as we know, belong to the Dangar, that is a pastoralist shepherd caste. So he, in his books, said that the media was engaged, those who were paying for Tukojirao's blood were indulging in falsehoods and sensationalism. He blamed Mumtaz as a bold digger and an adventuress who ensnared young rich men, and he called Bawla a pleasure-seeking young man. Tukojirao, Prabodhankar interestingly claimed that Mumtaz was secretly in love with Shankarrao Gowde and unfaithful to the Maharaja. And he says that the investigations into Mumtaz Begum's relationship with Gowde would expose the truth of the conspiracy, because the conspirators, remember, wanted to take her to Indore to ensure Gowde's release from prison. And the attempt turned into a very bloody scuffle because of, this is what Prabodhankar says, because of the presence of very aggressive, raw-minded youth like Shafi Ahmad. And Prabodhankar says that even if Tukojirao was involved in this conspiracy, how come no conspirator named him even when he was on the verge of death? Eventually, so coming back to the abdication, eventually, Tukojirao was told by the British government that a commission of inquiry would be set up, but he decided to abdicate in February that year, February 1926. There was a lot of back and forth that happened behind the scenes, because Tukojirao proposed to spend 2 years in England, during which the state would be administered by a council of regency. But all this was struck down by the British. And Diwan Jarmonidas has a very interesting anecdote to narrate in his book called Maharaja. He says that Sir Kenneth Fitz was the resident of Indore. He went to meet Tukojirao and obtain his signature on the deed of abdication. He said very copious crocodile tears, and Tukojirao was signing on it. So the resident came out of the palace and he saw the Indore state's standard flying on it. So he immediately asked for it to be removed because he said Tukojirao is not the king anymore. So there's no way in which he can continue to fly the Indore state flag. So that's a very interesting anecdote. See, incidentally, Malabar Hill, as some of you may know, has a very strong connection with prehistory. It is said that Lord Rama had come to Valkeshwar at Ranganga, and the Kodis, who are the original inhabitants of Mumbai, revered a natural cleft in the rock that was called Shribundi. This cleft was in the shape of a yoni, and it was believed that if you pass through that cleft, you will be purged of all your sins. But the irony is, Tukojirao Holkar, I mean, this, of course, this sin purging cleft was destroyed probably by the Portuguese, who practiced a very severe version of their Roman Catholic faith. But the irony is, Tukojirao Holkar was forced to abdicate because of a taint of a murder that was committed on this very Malabar Hill. And Tukojirao was replaced on the throne by his son Yashwantrao Holkar. He was the last king of Indore. Incidentally, his father and grandfather were both forced to abdicate by the British. And as I said earlier, Shivajirao Holkar, as the photograph makes it clear, he was a very well-built, strong man. He was a wrestler. In fact, he would like to invite people to come to the of the streets to come to the palace and wrestle with him. But he was also given to irascible fits of temper. He had an anger management problem. So he would often stand. He was known to be a slightly eccentric person. So he would stand at a high window in his darbar and order the abduction of men wearing men on the street wearing black coats. On one occasion, he had the bankers of Indore tied to the Indore to the state coach, and he drove them around town, whipping them soundly. So there was an occasion wherein some members of a nomadic tribe were beaten so badly by his men that some of them died. So that set off, I mean, complaints against because he had a very bristling association with the British, and it is said that in 1903 he had even assaulted the British resident. So eventually he was forced to abdicate by the British, and Tukojirao came to the throne. And incidentally, Tukojirao would similarly be forced to abdicate in a different set of circumstances. So, of course, the story does not end there. After his abdication, Tukojirao went abroad because the Holkars, of course, were a very rich royal family. There he fell in love with a girl, with an American girl who was 17 years his junior. Her name was Nancy Miller, and she was the exact antithesis of Mumtaz Begum because she came from a very rich family. Her father owned gold mines in Alaska. He decided to marry her. So his community, that is the Dhangar caste, opposed the wedding because naturally this girl was a Christian, she was a foreigner. So it was this man, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, the man who actually needs no introduction, who, along with another social reformer, Rao Bahadur Sitaram Keshav Bole, helped iron out the opposition to this marriage. So they held a rally at Baramati. They addressed members of the Dhangar community, in which, after which the members of this community decided to do away with the opposition to Tukojirao's marriage. The other hindrance to the marriage was, again, because there was no formal convention for someone being reconverted to Hinduism till then. But there was a section of Hindu nationalists who had started the Shuddhi movement, which sought to reconvert people to Hinduism or even convert them to Hinduism. So when his marriage was being opposed, Tukojirao threatened to convert to Islam. When some leaders of the Hindu Mahasabha came to know about it, they ensured that this girl Nancy Miller was converted to Hinduism instead. This was led by Vinayak Damodar Savarkar and his older brother Ganesh Babarao Savarkar. And one account says that one of Savarkar's followers was working in the telegraph department, and one of Tukojirao's PAs was a Muslim. So he sent a telegram to Tukojirao asking him to convert to Islam to ease the marriage. So when one of the Hindu Mahasabha activists working in the telegraph department came to know about it, he informed Vinayak Damodar Savarkar and Babarao Savarkar about it, and they got in touch with Shankaracharya, Dr. Lingesh Kurtakoti, who was the Shankaracharya of the Karvi repeat. He was associated with the Hindu Mahasabha, and he was one of the leading lights of the Shuddhi movement. In fact, despite being the Shankaracharya, he wrote a play called Ganga Sammati Athwa Hindu Karan Manyata. This was written in Marathi, which advocated reconvergence to Hinduism. It's a fictional account of a poet called Jagannath Pandit, who was employed in the Darbar of the Mughal Emperor Akbar. So Akbar's adopted daughter Lavangi falls in love with Jagannath Pandit, and she decides to convert to Hinduism to marry him, and they meet with resistance from both the Hindu priestly class, Orthodox priestly class, and the Islamic clergy. But Kurtakoti had a royal falling out with Chhatrapati Shahu. Now Chhatrapati Shahu comes into the picture because even today we talk of honor killings and love jihad and whatnot. So in those days, Chhatrapati Shahu had actually ensured that his cousin from the paternal side, Chandraprabha Bhai, see, because the Chhatrapatis of Kolhapur are blue-blooded Marathas by caste, and the Holkars are Dhangars. So Chhatrapati Shahu, because he wanted to dismantle the caste system, and there are two cornerstones of the caste system in India. Number one, it was the ban on intercaste dining. Number two, intercaste marriage. So Chhatrapati Shahu used to dine with people from other castes, including Dalits. So he wanted to dismantle the other cornerstone of the caste system, that is the ban on intermarriage. So he decided to marry one of his own cousin sister to Tukojirao's son Yashwantrao Holkar, which was a very revolutionary act in those days, and he faced intense resistance from a section of his own community, as has been attested to by his biographer. And Tukojirao Holkar and Chhatrapati Shahu conducted 25 such Dangar Maratha marriages, intercaste marriages. So this whole case has a very complex cast of characters. You also have Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Of course, Tilak died in 1920, but it was Tilak's sort of clash with Chhatrapati Shahu, which led to a reformist streak being kindled in Shahu Maharaj. You also have a Shankaracharya, you have Muhammad Ali Jinnah, you have the Savarkar brothers, you have a very upright police officer like Sir Patrick Kelly. You also have a number of micro histories here. You have the Shuddhi movement, you have the Hindu Sangathan movement, you have the social reform and non-Brahmin movement. So, in a sense, I would say that this murder, and more than a murder, and I would rather say equally interesting, is a cataclysmic chain of events that it set into motion, and the events that happened both before and after this murder. So, that's it. So, if any one of you has any questions to ask.
Thank you so much, and it truly was a sensational murder. So thanks, Dhaval, for taking us through this detailed account of this case. And it is interesting to see the number of characters and events that were involved in this murder case. There are a couple of questions that have come up, but to handle the questions, I will hand it over to Farooq.
Yes. Dhaval, like Diksha rightly mentioned, so many dimensions, so much religion, culture, uh, politics, etc. How long was the book in the making? How long did your research take you?
To be very honest with you, I had to write the book in just 3.5 months because it was slightly expedient. Because to be honest with you, there were other people working on it as well. So I had to write it very fast, and that included trips to Delhi to consult papers in the National Archives. Unfortunately, the publishing was delayed because of the lockdown. So we could actually plan to publish it in August, and Then the date was shifted to November, then December, and finally the book was out in January.
Correct.
So, as I said, equally interesting. Of course, the murder is interesting, but what is equally interesting is the cast of characters involved. So everything converges in at one point. So that is what I found more interesting as a student of social movements in Maharashtra and India.
Yes, and I'm sure that must have got you interested in all the socio-cultural movements and the undercurrents and the cast of characters. You mentioned certain places. Are there any milestones still around? Like you mentioned the house in Chowpatty, and I think you mentioned Somerset House. Are all these locations known? Where, for instance, in Chowpatty?
At Chowpatty, when you proceed from Wilson College to Malabar Hill,
Yes.
There's a Y junction there. And,
Yes.
right, when you turn to right, you go to Babulna.
Yes.
So the second second last house before the turning house is something called the Islam Club. So
Okay.
Bawla used to stay in that building.
Okay.
I've tried to locate Somerset House, but I could not. In fact, the conspirators used to stay at Somerset House and Aurora House. Unfortunately, there was a lockdown.
Well, there is a Somerset House in Colaba, if that helps you.
No, this was on somewhere around Warden Road, the Mount Road. So very close by.
Okay.
So this was a South Mumbai murder in that sense.
There was a question, I think, before you answered it. Why did Shivaji Rao abdicate? You answered it briefly about his, shall we say, oppressive characteristics. Is there anything more that you'd like to add?
He was someone who was given to severe fits of anger, and there was a British resident who was appointed with some of his powers were taken away. British resident was appointed, etc. But his, I think, biggest problem was he had anger management issues. So he was eventually asked to abdicate in favor of his son, and again the son had to abdicate in a different set of circumstances.
For different reasons.
In fact, Yashwantrao Holkar, he came very close to being thrown off the throne because because Chandraprabha Bai or Sanyogita Devi, as she was known after marriage, passed away soon after. She died very young. So beautiful lady, and then Yashwantrao Holkar married 2 American divorcees in quick succession. The second marriage with an American divorcee, that again ended in a divorce. He married for the 3rd time, and he wrote to the President of the United States, if my memory serves me right, asking him to intervene in some dispute in India. So the British obviously were very cheesed off, and he was almost forced to abdicate.
Okay. Geraldine is asking, if, in your knowledge, are there any other Maharajas who had to abdicate and for similar reasons?
I can name 2 Maharajas with a strong Maharashtra connection. The first was Maharaja Mallar Rao Gaikwad of Baroda. Baroda was again a huge princely state, one of the 21 gun salute states, as it was known. There were 5 21 gun salute states. So Maharaja Mallar Rao Holkar, Khanderao Holkar, of Baroda, he was accused of trying to poison the British resident, and he was forced to abdicate. He was replaced by a very iconic king. Unfortunately, we know very little about him. And personally, I would say that his work was as significant as that of Chhatrapati Shahu of Kolhapur, and that was Maharaja Sayajirao Gaikwad of Baroda. He gradually tried to dismantle the caste system. In fact, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar went abroad for his education based on scholarship given by Sayajirao Gaikwad. And the second king who came to the throne in a similar set of circumstances when his predecessor was forced to abdicate was Maharaja Bhavanrao Srinivasrao Panta Pratinidhi of Aund in Satara district. It was a very small princely state, and Balasaheb Pant Pratinidhi, as he was known, ruled. It was just 72 village strong. It was a very small princely state, but Bhavanrao Panta Pratinidhi introduced far-reaching reforms in his princely state. First, he was inspired by he's a Hungarian Jew. Maurice Friedman to actually devolve power to the mass, devolve this power to the masses. He met Mahatma Gandhi at Wardha, after which he started an experiment with village level democracy. He supported the freedom fighters. In fact, in Satara, during the Quit India movement, you had a parallel government that had been set up by Nana Patil and other armed revolutionaries. So Bhavan Rao Pant Prathinidhi used to actively aid and abet these revolutionary activities. But again, unfortunately, we know very little about him. A less charitable reference is found because Bhavan Rao Pant Prathinidhi was very fond of physical exercise. He nurtured a certain physical culture in his princely state. And he was very fond of doing performing Surya Namaskars.
Okay.
So Acharya Atre, the famous Marathi author and satirist, he wrote a play on him called Sashtanga Namaskar, which portrayed him in a less than favorable light. So he's known more for that, but actually his work goes much beyond that. So this is the second Maharaja with a Maharashtra connection that I can recall.
Sad that someone who was at the center of all this controversy, there's no trace of her. She just disappears in Hollywood. She would have made a fantastic. It would have made a fantastic autobiography.
Yes. See, there are certain references to her that are found online, but the problem is they are not authentic. There's some references to her, but I mean, by and large, we can say that we lose trace of her once she goes to Hollywood. We don't know what happened to her later. We don't even know what happened to her daughter, Sadat Begum. That is sad, as you rightly pointed out, because the entire case sort of moves around her, and she had a very ugly legal battle with her mother and her stepfather. So I would say, in a sense, she is the victim, right? So sad, we lose trace of her. That is very sad.
That's, as some comments have come in, this should have made a super hit movie.
God willing, I think we should.
Namrata observes that there is a Somerset House in Warden Road. It's in the same lane as Sophia College.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for that. I'll go there personally. I'm onto the murder spot. I mean, where the murder may have happened.
That's fairly easy to trace based on your description. Now it's a one-way street coming down from Malabar Hill, but you mentioned that they took a wrong turning and went up that road. When
they went up Gibbs Road, and when they saw the whole incident unfold in front of their eyes.
In my mind, I'm visualizing it somewhere between the Kemp's Corner signal and before you hit Hanging Gardens.
Oh, no. This actually happened just after just after Hanging Garden, the road, just on Bridge Road.
Correct.
And it was a running fight, because when you go through the court documents, you realize it was a running fight. There were some 7 or 8 people involved, plus you had Bawla, then you had these 4 army officers. Naturally, they were members of Bawla's entourage. So naturally, this may have spread over a large area.
You mentioned that Bawla was related to Haji Sabu Siddiq. His grandson, did you say?
Yes, grandson. Right. He was Sabu Siddiq's grandson. His mother was Sabu Siddiq's daughter.
Yes. That brings us to the end of the questions. Dhaval, it was really fascinating.
Thank
and I'm
you.
sure this will enthuse a lot of people to read the book. There was a question asking, where can this book be bought from? Is it started to get available in bookstores?
Yes. It's available online. It's available on Amazon.
Great.
Also on Flipkart. I'm sure you can also find it in stores. Of course, Amazon is easier to...
Yes. I have one last question. You did say that it was a trial by media. Suppose you were to transport this incident to today, how do you think social media would have behaved?
My God, Farooq, I can't even think of it. I've been a journalist for 2 decades, but I can't even think of it. It's horrible. You've seen the whole media trial play out in the Sushant Singh Rajput case. I can cite umpteen instances of media trials being conducted. Something that we were taught as journalism students was facts are sacred, comments is free. Comments are free. So, that facts are sacred dictum is, I think, gradually being thrown to the winds. So I can't even think of what would happen today.
I couldn't resist.
My blood freezes. I can't say.
I love to ask this question to hardcore
See, the problem,
journalists like you.
problem today, I'm making a slight digression here. We tend to presume innocence or culpability. That is the problem. So, with people playing the role, and now you have WhatsApp University, it's all the more dangerous.
Correct.
So, people play the role of accuser, prosecutor, and judge, which is all the more dangerous.
I have a phrase for it. Have cyberspace will expound. Anyone with a keyboard and anyone with WhatsApp. Yes.
So we have a slightly more uncharitable phrase in Marathi.
Right.
Those of you who can understand Marathi, I'm sure will get the drift. It says "Makadacha hatat kolit."
Oh yes.
So those of you who can understand Marathi will get the drift, which is what is happening with our social media warriors today.
I can translate it into Gujarati for you. It's in Gujarati. It says "Vandrana hatma astaro." Same thing. A razor in the hand of a monkey.
Yes. So the monkey will not, shave people. It will only cut their necks.
Right. Thank you so much. And I think your hardcore research as a journalist with so many years of experience has really shone through this presentation. So kudos for that. Thank you so much for your time. A real pleasure. And thank you everybody for attending. Do attend as many future talks as you possibly can.